Hey everyone, it's Vance Aloupis. So sorry I can't be with you today. I know it's virtual. Love to be in Naples in person, but I can't even be with you live virtually because I'm actually in committee right now. But I did want to take an opportunity to thank the Greater Naples Chamber for their continued focus on early childhood education. I honestly can't think of another local chamber that has been as dedicated to this issue as your chamber has been. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. For those of you who understand this issue and know how important it is, this message is not for you. This is really a message for people and business leaders who really don't understand how the conversation around childcare is going to ultimately impact their long-term bottom line. And if you've ever spent any time with me, you'll know that I talk a lot about how childcare is really about the workforce of tomorrow, that the foundation that we set with our youngest learners is really indicative of the competitiveness we're going to have as a state 15, 18, 20 years from now. But what the pandemic has shown us is that, childcare is not only about the workforce of tomorrow, it's about the workforce of today. For all of your employees who are doing their best to keep the lights on, childcare is a necessity. And what we've seen over the last 2 years, primarily because of the pandemic, is the challenges that our early learning centers have faced just trying to keep their doors open. Obviously, we've seen the issue of labor shortages, not only in the childcare industry, but across all other industries. But understand the implications for your industry as it relates to childcare. Our early learning teachers are making $11, $12 an hour. And what we're seeing now is that a lot of childcare workers are finding it really more beneficial to go work at a local fast food restaurant or a big box store because they'll make $16, $17 an hour. And what that means for the childcare center is that center cannot serve as many children, right? So a teacher in a pre-K classroom in Florida can serve 18 students. If a childcare center loses that teacher, that's 18 children that childcare center can't serve. That's 18 sets of parents that are struggling to find childcare, that in that moment. So, understanding the importance of making sure that the childcare industry is healthy, that we come out of this pandemic with real momentum, I think is critical to every other industry. And I know from a statewide perspective, working with the Florida Chamber of Commerce, they get this. They understand that we as a state really need to look at professionalizing our industry and making sure that we are investing wisely and effectively in high quality childcare across the state, because it's not just about establishing that foundation long term for children. That's the central piece of it. But it's making sure that our society can go back to work. And if parents don't have a place for their child to be during the day, to be safe and to be nurtured and to learn, it makes it really, really difficult for other industries to come back. Obviously, I'm in Tallahassee right now. Hopefully it's warmer in Naples than it is in Tallahassee, but a lot of things are moving through the legislative process. Last year, we passed what I believe are two of the most significant early childhood bills in the 10 plus years that I've been involved in this space, but probably really since the passage of the School Readiness Act of 1999. Representative Grawl passed HB 419. I was her co-prime sponsor, her prime co-sponsor, that really looked at professionalizing the industry, placing accountability into the system to make sure that the state is investing dollars in high quality childcare. It's not just about warehousing children, which unfortunately is a reality in too many communities. It's about making sure that children are going to centers that are having real outcomes. The 419 also created a division of early learning, named a chancellor. So, what we saw from last year to this year is the full professionalization of early childhood and seeing it in the same vein as our K-12 system, as our higher ed system, as our state college system. So hugely transformational policy. I carried HB 7011, which was probably the most significant focus on literacy that our state has ever taken, identifying struggling readers as quickly as possible and making sure that the necessary resources are injected as quickly as we can to make sure that those children are brought back up to grade level. And because we focused so much on quality last year and really looking at the structure around early learning, the big conversations we're seeing this year are around funding for early learning. Looking at the BSA for VPK. Representative Grawl, again, sort of, my best friend in this process on early learning issues, she's brought back HB 1199, which is a focus on school readiness funding and how are we actually funding these programs, making sure that that you have an equitable distribution of dollars across the state, because there's very real concern that some communities are not receiving the dollars they need, primarily because of the algorithm that we've used and the formula that we've used for school readiness funding. So, our goal from the very beginning, and I said this in committee the other day, that there's always been this conversation in early learning about, do we focus on quality or do we focus on funding? And it's really kind of a chicken or the egg situation, and they're interconnected. But we as a state, and I think wisely so, we focused first on quality, making sure that the structure and the accountability systems are in place to ensure that we have a high quality system. And now the goal is to make sure that it's appropriately funded. You do not, as a state, want to fund low quality care. That does not provide a service to any child. So building off of the success we had last year with HB 419, HB 7011, and really the overwhelming support we had for early learning, our focus this year is on trying to tackle some of those funding issues that have plagued our system for a long time. But my ask of you today is to really think about how these policies, which may not off the top of your head really resonate with what your bottom line is this year or next year, but understand, as I said, your support for early learning will dictate the workforce that we have in 2030, 2035, and 2040. So be proactive. But then secondly, also understand that there's a necessity now, and there's a reality that we're experiencing across the state where parents are not able to find accessible childcare just because of the nature of the pandemic. So we're working as hard as we can. There's a considerable amount of federal money that's been brought into this state that we're using to try and get a lot of these childcare centers back on their feet. But there's definitely a role that you can play as business leaders in terms of supporting your employees, supporting policies that focus on early learning, and really getting even more engaged with your local early learning coalition. Future Ready Collier, I know that's a major initiative. And again, I'll just finish by saying thank you again to the Greater Naples Chamber. It is, for someone who's been in this space for 10 years, who has waited and waited and waited for the business community to come to the table. It is hugely heartening to know that one of our most significant local chambers is taking this issue up, prioritizing it, and understands that we as a state cannot have the bright future that we all want without investing significantly and wisely in our youngest children. So hope you have a great webinar. Hope to see some of you in Tallahassee soon. And when we have an in-person event again, get it on my calendar and I'll be there. All the best.